I was washing the dinner dishes when my granddaughter walked in from next door, still wearing her backpack. She stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, just watching me, and something in her face made me turn off the tap. "Grandma," she said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Always." She slid her backpack off her shoulders and set it carefully on the kitchen chair, the way she always did when she was thinking hard about something. My granddaughter was 9 years old, careful with her words, the kind of child who noticed things adults didn't think children noticed. "Mr. Patterson's wife," she said slowly. "She gives me these little orange pills when I go over to play with their dog. She says they're vitamins. She says they're the same ones she gives her own kids." She paused. "But Grandma, they make me feel really weird, kind of dizzy and sleepy. I don't like how they feel." The dishcloth in my hand dropped into the sink. "I want to explain something before I go further, because it matters for what comes next." My granddaughter had been living with me for almost 2 years at that point. Her parents, my son and his wife, were working overseas. My son had taken a contract position in Calgary that turned into something longer, and then an opportunity came up that required them to move to a work camp in northern Alberta for an extended stretch. It wasn't a perfect arrangement, but it was temporary, and my granddaughter was happy in her school here in Oakville. She had friends on the street, she had her routine, she had me. I was 63 years old, retired from 28 years working at a municipal office in the planning department, and I had been managing just fine. I walked every morning. I had my garden. I had my book club on Thursday evenings. My life was quiet and full in the way that I'd come to appreciate. My husband Dennis worked from home. He was a project consultant, semi-retired himself, still taking on the occasional contract but mostly around the house. And for the past year and a half, he had been friendly with the couple who moved in 3 houses down the Pattersons. Tom Patterson was around his age. His wife, Sandra, was younger, maybe late 40s, blonde, the kind of woman who laughed loudly at her own jokes and brought store-bought squares to every neighborhood event and called them homemade. I had never warmed to Sandra. I told myself it was just a personality thing. Some people don't click, and that's fine. Standing in my kitchen with a wet dishcloth in the sink, looking at my granddaughter's small, serious face, I told myself to stay calm. "How long has she been giving you these pills?" I asked. "Since March, I think. When it started getting warmer and I started going over to play with Biscuit more. Biscuit was their golden retriever. My granddaughter adored that dog." "And you took them?" She looked at the floor. "She said they were good for me. She said you'd be glad I was taking them. She said lots of kids in the neighborhood took them." "Has she ever said anything else to you? Asked you not to tell me about the pills?" "She thought about it. She said it was kind of our special routine, like a little secret between neighbors." She looked up at me. "That felt weird too, Grandma. That's kind of why I wanted to ask you." I reached out and held both her hands in mine. "You did exactly the right thing telling me. Exactly right. I am so proud of you." I kept my voice even. "Are the pills upstairs? In your room?" She nodded and went to get them. I stood at the kitchen counter and breathed. My mind was running very fast in a very controlled direction, the way it does when you've worked in a bureaucratic environment for nearly 3 decades and you've learned to process alarming information without letting it spill onto your face. She came back with a small amber-colored prescription bottle. No label. That was the first thing I registered. The second thing I registered was that the pills inside were small, white, and oval. They were not vitamins. I didn't know what they were, but I knew what vitamins looked like. I told my granddaughter I was going to make a phone call and that she should watch her show in the living room and have her snack. I waited until I heard the television before I picked up my phone. My closest friend Patricia had been a registered pharmacist for 31 years before she retired. She lived 12 minutes from me, over near the lake. I had known her since our children were in primary school together. There was no one on earth I trusted more with something like this. I was in my car with the pill bottle in my jacket pocket before I'd even fully thought through what I was doing. I left a note on the counter for my granddaughter saying I'd be back in 20 minutes. Patricia met me at her front door. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside without saying a word. I handed her the bottle. She unscrewed the cap, shook one pill into her palm, and went completely still. "Where did your granddaughter get these?" she asked. "The neighbor's wife. She told her they were vitamins." Patricia set the pill down on her kitchen counter and looked at me. "These are not vitamins. These look like they could be a low-dose benzodiazepine." Without a lab test, I can't tell you exactly what they are, but I can tell you with complete certainty that no child should be taking these. These are sedatives, Eleanor. They cause drowsiness, reduced coordination, confusion. The room went very quiet around me. I thought about all the afternoons over the past several months when my granddaughter had come home from the Pattersons and fallen asleep on the couch before dinner. I had thought she was just tired from playing. I had thought it was fresh air and running around with the dog. He had given her a blanket. Patricia was watching me. You need to take these to your doctor today. You need to keep them as evidence. And you need to think very carefully about who else knew your granddaughter was being given these. That last sentence landed like something heavy being set on a table. I drove home slowly. I want to tell you what I knew about Sandra Patterson and what I should have seen sooner. I want to tell you because I think it matters that I didn't put it together until that afternoon, sitting in my car in my own driveway, putting pieces together that had been sitting in front of me for months. Sandra had started coming by our house in the late spring of last year, just dropping in. She would bring something muffins, a magazine she thought I'd like, once a small succulent in a terracotta pot. She was friendly in a way that had always felt slightly performative to me, like friendliness being demonstrated rather than felt. But I was polite. She was a neighbor. What I had noticed, but not properly registered, was that Sandra came by most often on weekday afternoons, and that Dennis was almost always home. I had caught them once in a conversation in our front hallway that stopped a beat too late when I came in from the garden. I had noticed that Dennis knew the name of Sandra's sister, her sister's husband, details about their cottage in Muskoka. I had noticed that when Sandra's name came up, Dennis mentioned her with a slightly careful neutrality. I had noticed all of this, and filed it somewhere I wasn't ready to open. I was ready now. I went inside. My granddaughter was still watching her show. I checked on her, told her I loved her, and then I went upstairs. I want to be very clear about what I was looking for and what I was not prepared to find. I went through my husband's home office the way I had never in 35 years of marriage thought I would need to. I was not angry yet. I was operating on something colder and steadier than anger, something that felt almost clinical. His second cell phone was in the bottom drawer of his desk, inside a zipped interior pocket of an old laptop case. I had not known about a second phone. I sat in his office chair and I looked at that phone for a long time before I turned it on. I will not describe everything I read. I will tell you enough. There were messages going back 11 months. Sandra Patterson and my husband, detailed and unmistakable. But it was one particular exchange, from a Tuesday afternoon in September, that made my hands stop shaking and go completely still. Sandra had messaged him. She fell asleep by 4 again. You've got at least 2 hours. Tom's in Mississauga. And my husband had replied, on my way. My granddaughter. She had been talking about my granddaughter. Sandra had been giving my granddaughter sedatives so that she would fall asleep in the afternoons, so that Sandra could come to my house while I was at my book club or my physiotherapy appointments or my sister's place, while my granddaughter was asleep 3 houses down, while Tom Patterson was away for work. My granddaughter had been used as a logistical convenience. I sat in that office for a long time. Then I did 4 things. I took photographs of the messages with my own phone. I called Patricia back and told her what I had found and asked her to keep the pills safe. I called my doctor's office and made an emergency same-day appointment for my granddaughter. And then I called my son in Alberta and told him everything. That last call was the hardest thing I have ever done. Telling your child that his daughter was given sedatives by a neighbor. Telling him the role his father played, even indirectly, in the situation that made it possible. My son was silent for a very long time. Then he said, "We'll be there in 2 days, Mum. Don't do anything until we get there." His voice was the voice of someone keeping themselves together for my sake, and I loved him for it. I did do one thing before they arrived, because I couldn't wait. I went to speak to Dennis that evening after my granddaughter was in bed. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten 35 years of dinners, where we had helped our son with homework, where we had done our taxes every February, and I placed my phone on the table between us with the photographs visible. He went gray. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I told him what I knew. I told him what had been done to my granddaughter. I told him that I had already spoken to a doctor, already spoken to a lawyer friend, already preserved everything. I told him that I wanted him out of the house before my granddaughter woke up in the morning. He tried to speak twice. The second time, he said Sandra had told him the pills were harmless, herbal, that she had given them to her own nephew. I looked at him. Our granddaughter was given an unlabeled prescription sedative, I said, so that your girlfriend could come to this house while she was unconscious 3 doors down. You want me to talk about what Sandra told you? He left that night. He packed a bag and he left. I went in and checked on my granddaughter, who was sleeping deeply, peacefully, and I sat in the chair beside her bed for a while with the lamp off. When my son and daughter-in-law arrived 2 days later, we went to the police together. The officer who took our statement was thorough and kind. The pill bottle went to a lab. I will not get ahead of what I'm allowed to say about how that process unfolded, because some of it is still ongoing. What I can tell you is that what Patricia suspected was confirmed. What I can tell you is that the matter was taken seriously. Sandra Patterson came to my door the morning after Dennis left. I watched her through the sidelight window for a moment before I opened it. She was carrying something I think it was meant to look like a casual visit, a neighborly pop-in. I opened the door. She started to speak and I said, very quietly, I know everything. My lawyer has copies of everything. The police have the pills. I'd like you to leave my property now. Her face did something complicated. Then she left. I want to talk about my granddaughter for a moment, because she is the person who matters most in this story. She is also the person who, in her quiet, careful 9-year-old way, ended it. Because she noticed something was wrong. Because she felt uncomfortable with a secret and she trusted me enough to say so. We have talked about it together, the two of us, in small pieces over several weeks. The way children need to process things not all at once, but in small doses, coming back to it when they're ready. I have been honest with her in the ways that are appropriate for her age. I have told her that the pills were not good for her and that she should never take anything from any adult without checking with me or her parents first. I have told her she was brave and right to tell me. I have told her that none of this was her fault, not a single part of it. She asked me once, about 2 weeks after everything happened, whether I was sad. I thought about it honestly before I answered. A little, I said. But mostly I feel okay. Because you're okay, and that's the only thing that really matters. She seemed satisfied with that. We went back to our puzzle. Her parents stayed for 3 weeks. They talked about bringing her to Alberta, and we had those conversations seriously and carefully, all of us together. In the end, she finished out the school year here with me. She wanted to. She has her friends, her school, her routine. We wanted her to feel that her life was stable, that the ground under her feet was still solid. It is. I made sure of it. I'm not going to tell you that I feel nothing when I pull into my driveway and see that house 3 doors down. I'm not going to tell you that 35 years disappears cleanly. Grief is not that cooperative. There are mornings when I make 2 cups of tea out of habit and then stand there in my kitchen looking at the extra mug on the counter, and it takes me a second to catch up with myself. But I want to tell you about last Saturday, because it matters. My granddaughter and I drove out to a conservation area east of town, the one with the long trail along the creek, and we walked for almost 2 hours. She talked the entire time about her friend's new puppy, about a book she was reading, about whether she wanted to do art camp or sailing camp this summer, about a joke she'd heard that she couldn't quite remember properly, and then laughed at the wrong version of anyway. Driving home, she fell asleep in the back seat, the way children do when they've burned through a whole afternoon of good, clean outdoor air. This time, I knew exactly why she was sleeping. I adjusted the rearview mirror so I could see her face. Peaceful, safe, completely herself. That's what I held on to. That's what I'm still holding on to. If your child or grandchild ever tells you something feels wrong, a gift, a secret, a routine someone else has established with them that you didn't know about, please listen the way she needed me to listen. She trusted me with something small that turned out to be something enormous, and I am so grateful she did. Trust that instinct in them. Protect that trust in yourself. They notice more than we think, and when they bring it to us, that is the whole world trusting us to get it right.